What's up, everybody? Welcome on into this edition of Warchant TV. I'm Aslan Hajavani, joined by founder and administrator of the ultimate Seminoles sports source, Warchant.com, and that would be Gene Williams. Subscribe to the website, promo codes below. You can even hit the little subscribe button in the right corner near Gene to subscribe to our YouTube page. Hit the little bell, set your notifications for however frequently or infrequently you want to be notified about videos. And the story that Gene diligently knocked out is also linked in the description below. Gene, listen, hey, you're the boss, so you get to make the rules. If I was tasked with having to write a position preview, I would go after the offensive line. I think it's one of the more uplifting storylines from a down 2020 and a group that grew a lot in 2020. I think has got even more room ahead of them in their ceiling, and I think they're going to get there. How do you like this offensive line, and what's got you feeling optimistic about this bunch?
Yeah, you're right. Being the boss has its privileges because admittedly I didn't. When Ira threw the offensive line at me, I'm like, great, that's something. What position is as positive right now as offensive line? I mean, because they had nowhere to go but up, frankly, and they were awful in 2019. We can throw up some of those numbers, but and you can see that. I mean, whether you looked at, I like to look at obviously Pro Football Focus, and there's Football Outsiders does a lot of the analytics with line yards and stuff like that. So I think it's, again, this stuff is a lot of it's subjective, but when you can see a dramatic improvement, they're better. And you saw it. You saw it with your eyeballs last year. They were definitely better, especially when it comes to running the football. I mean, you look at the first of all, look at those line yards from 19 to 20 to 115 to 17. I mean, that's an insane amount of growth. And then you look at just the basic numbers too. Florida State averaged 60 more yards a game on the ground, and I think 1.3 or 1.4 more yards per carry. I mean, that's huge. Teams do not make those kind of jumps. And obviously some of that was Jordan Travis running around, but a lot of it was a lot of improvement on the offensive line. So that's a very encouraging going into 2020, especially when you got most of the key guys back. And I will say the pass blocking was only a moderate improvement over 2019. I do think there's some room to grow there, but I think that's the benefit of having all these guys back, having an actual full off season, whether it's the weight room, spring practice, off season stuff that they'll be able to do. We hope pretty much like normal this year. So there's every room to be optimistic. I'm not saying they're going to go out and be Alabama's offensive line this fall, but man, when's the last time Florida State had an average or an above average offensive line? So, I mean, it can do wonders for you.
Yeah. And for the folks that might not be as dialed into analytics and advanced measurables, line yards, that basically kind of says how much of those yards that a running back gets or the rushing yards are kind of the responsibility of the offensive line.
Yeah, how much attributable to them. So if you see a running back go through 3 yards and the offensive line pushes 3 yards ahead, I mean, that's all the offensive line that did that. But because a lot of times when we get they might have you see how many plays you see a guy get caught in the backfield, but yet he breaks the tackle and goes for 10 yards. Well, the offensive line doesn't get credit for that. So it's a good metric, I think, to judge how well an offensive line does in run blocking.
They're obviously working to get the numbers they want. I think when Mike Norvell first took the job, I don't know if it was either he or Alex Atkins talked about like 8's kind of the number they want to be at in terms of guys they can kind of rely on. But when you look at the depth chart of this group, obviously it's a lot of guys returning, not a lot of new names, but they are going to hopefully maybe go for somebody in the transfer portal. This is going to be, again, this is a group that's going to return largely from what they were last year. So you got to feel pretty good about how much they're going to be able to grow and build off what they did last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the one wrench in this whole thing is it seems like they've got at least one more spot available. And my money's on an offensive tackle transfer that they get. Something's going to happen after spring practice at some point, and someone's going to go in the portal, and they're going to grab them. So this is a projected depth chart. It could be totally different because there's a lot of moving parts, but I wouldn't be surprised if that new transfer comes in and works into one of those spots, especially at the tackle position. But, even looking at this, Aslan, I think when you talk about it, I think they've got 3 viable, even at tackle. I mean, Devontae Love-Taylor comes back healthy. We know. We saw that the grades are insane. I write about in the story. I mean, he's so far ahead of everybody in terms of pass blocking, run blocking, everything he was able to do. So to have him back healthy is huge. I mean, he's an outstanding offensive tackle. So you think he's going to be one of those starters. And then Robert Scott started a ton of games last year and got better, I thought, as the year went on. So you got to think, man, he's got to be penciled in. And then Darius Washington's also played tackle, played a little guard. He's in there too. But obviously, I think you'd like one more if you get that transfer in there and give you at least – you're going to have injuries. We saw it all last year. It seemed like every game a guy went down. So if you're able to have a viable backup at both tackle spots, I think it puts you in a great position. And I can go ahead and talk a little bit about the interior spots as well.
Yeah, 4 tackles is where you want to be at that you can count on. Yeah, that's what sticks out. As you're looking at left guard, you got Thomas Schrader ahead of Dante Lucas. I'm sure that's going to cause some eyebrows to be raised.
And I wrote about that in the story, and I said that's the one position that's a coin flip in my mind. I mean, Lucas is, let's face it, man, he underachieved. He regressed this last season, had to be benched a couple times during the season, but man, he's got all, like they say in the NFL, he's got the draft capital. I mean, he was an elite prospect coming out of high school, IMG. Got dubbed the Pope because he was so dominating guys in these one-on-one drills that he baptized them as he put them down. Just all-world ability, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't translated so far. And you saw some real positives. Thomas Schrader got some time last year. You're hearing real positive stuff about him in the offseason training. So I think that's going to be a great battle with those two guys. And the hope is when you start getting that depth pass on, that spurs competition, that spurs guys to do better and perform at a higher rate. So if that's the case, it makes both Schrader and Lucas better, then they ought to be in a great position. I mean, look at the regression in the total. Look at the offensive number overall. That's from 61, if you put out before, around 60 is about average.
Right.
So that wasn't awful for him his first year playing, but then to go to 48.7 is not good.
No.
That's pretty bad. So, I mean, that's atypical of what you would see in offensive linemen. Typically, you get stronger, you learn the system, you get better. Now, granted, he's had to adjust to a new coach. Had all the screwy stuff last season with the off seasons. The hope is he can be better there. But either way, I think you're going to be in much better shape at that guard position because one of those two guys is going to emerge. Now, I think the other two positions, it seemed like they really were dedicated to having Maury Smith be that center. I don't see another guy's going to go there. So I think being healthy, all things considered, he seems to be the guy. And, you know, and Bavion made the move last year to guard at the end, and I thought he was better at the guard position really than he was at center, especially since they want Maury Smith there. But really that spot's up for grabs too. And like I said, with the transfer, we think a transfer's coming in. That can mix all this stuff up as well. I don't see one of the two true freshmen coming in really competing. They have a little bit of depth this year. You typically don't see a true freshman start or really contribute. So I'd be a little surprised if that happened this year.
Yeah. If they do get that grad transfer, though, I would think Love Taylor's a guy that probably gets flexed inside, and I just wonder what
he could. Yeah, he did play a little bit on the interior, but that's the conundrum. Aslan, what do you do in the spring? Do you just assume you're going to get that guy and train him, there? I mean, I guess you're going to cross train him probably either way in the spring, but man, if he's holding down that left tackle spot and he's looking good, man, I'd hate to take that away, especially when you're going to be protecting Mackenzie Milton back there to mix things around, but. That's a nice thing. You have some versatility that he's able to play multiple positions.
Right. A good place to be in, though, I think, overall, though, right,
yeah.
Gene, for where they've been and where they're at right now?
Yeah, all you got to do is look at those 2019, 129 out of 130, according to Pro Football Focus, in the overall offensive line numbers. That's almost as bad as it can possibly get. So they have made significant strides. And like I said, everybody really, other than, I guess, Baselli's the only guy effectively you lost, who was kind of a part-time starter, really more of a backup last year. And that's it. So in theory, when you're well coached, you got a full season, this group together, you ought to have significant improvement. So, I mean, there's a lot of reason for optimism.
Yeah, they can be good. I think they might actually be good.
Above average, you think, Aslan?
I'm there for it.
All right, you're taking the over. So we'll say the over-under on the final PFF grade, you're saying they're going to be above whatever that is, 75, or it would be 70, around 70 or 65, let's say. I guess will be average, 65 if there's 130 teams. So you're taking the under on that. All right.
I'm hammering the over on. They'll be graded over 65. They'll be.
Well, you want to be great. I'm saying the ranking will be.
Oh, I got you on the 65.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think it's possible. I mean, it's definitely possible. And I really like Alex Atkins. You hear so many positive things. And don't underestimate the fact that these guys have the same coach now, because they've been churning through offensive line coaches every year, and that's not good for anybody. But the same unit with the same coach, a full off season, yeah, this should be improved.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons and a lot of explanations for why things happened the way they happened last year. But Alex Atkins had to deal with the same stuff, and he was able to make his unit perform at a much higher level. So I'm very hopeful and excited to see what he's got in store for 2021. A much more thorough breakdown of the offensive line position can be found over at warchant.com. The story, again, linked at the bottom in the item description. And we'll have plenty more position previews coming up over at warchant.com. Gene, thanks for the time and knowledge.